So, Cornelia, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. It's absolutely wonderful to talk with you, Ben, because it's been a couple of months. We've been trying to arrange this, haven't we? And there's been lots of things getting in the way. So it's really good
Yeah.
to finally catch up with you. And I was thinking actually before coming on the call today, it's so nice to talk to people who work in the sports world and in the
Mm.
coaching world, the training world, because we'll probably talk about this a little bit in a moment. But I guess that generally sits outside of my usual, I guess, client space, but there's so much connection between sport, coaching, and the work I do. And I love hearing about your work. So I'm looking forward to this
Yeah,
conversation.
no, me too. I mean, so for the listeners, we met because we were on a panel for delivery talking about resilience, and I was blown away by listening to Cornelia's background and what she's been doing, and just so much insight. So I'm thankful that you've got the time, because I know how busy you are, to come on and kind of share some of your gems with the listeners. But by way of introduction, I guess, can you just kind of give the guys that listen to the podcast a bit more about yourself, your background? Because I've seen different titles, and obviously likewise that that you're the founder of. But it'd be great to kind of get some insight.
Yeah, sure, definitely, Ben. And it's always an interesting question because I guess my work straddles different worlds. So I am a leadership psychologist, if you want kind of in a short summary. But actually what that means is I do a lot of work around leadership development and developing leaders, individuals, teams, whole kind of organization systems for, I guess, mental and emotional performance.
Uh-huh.
So it could be supporting like a small organization, developing their managers or their leaders with their behaviors that bring the best out of their colleagues around them. Or it could be working with a charity to develop their wellbeing approach and how they're going to improve their wellbeing and resilience. So I kind of do both the leadership development side and also the psychology side. So I've got the joy of being both a consultant and a psychologist. So I bring those
Yeah.
two worlds together in my work. And obviously, I think you and I were connecting on this before, but I'm also a coaching psychologist. So I'm
Yeah.
really fascinated with coaching and how we get the best from people. And my kind of branch of psychology, because there's so many different branches, is about positive psychology. And
Mm.
that is about optimal functioning. So there's a massive connection between that and sport psychology. It's all about, how do we as individuals bring the best out of ourselves, but also bring the best out of people around us, whether that's in a team or whether that's in like an organization or a system. So I've been really privileged to spend, I guess, the last kind of decade really exploring through research and practice, what does it look like to optimally function, to be at our best as an individual or as a team or as an organization. And I'm fascinated by it. And I absolutely love the work that I do. And I think, over the last year and a half and this craziness that we've all been going through with the pandemic,
Yeah.
I feel really grateful to do the work that I do and try and support and help share what we know from science and psychology into what brings the best out of us.
Well, I think that's what kind of got me when I heard you speaking before, the science element, but also, I'm a big believer in coaching. And I often say, to our academy, students, that personal training is just, it's so in line with coaching. And when I went and did some formal education on coaching with the fantastic Barefoot Coaching Academy,
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah.
which was mind blowing. It literally changed my life doing that with them post grad. And I always say to trainers, if you really want to get that insight into how you can help your clients, go and start to study more and see more about it. But going back to then COVID-19, I was thinking this morning, COVID-19, meaning 2019, we're now going into February 2021, right? And I feel that also there's still a lot of fitness professionals out there, especially, that are still kind of thinking, well, we'll get back to normal soon, right? And so that's where I wanted to kind of touch base with you also on, firstly, how have you been with COVID-19? And, you know, what are the key things that you kind of find that people are struggling with? And these people are obviously then clients of what fitness professionals are dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. Well, big question, and so many avenues, I guess, to go down on that. And I think going back to your point about just how long this time period has been, I guess really draws our attention to resilience and motivation, and how do we keep going when things are really tough, and where, you know, sometimes we've experienced that in the past in moments or minutes or short spells. This has been a kind of prolonged, you know, 12, 14, 15 months now. I'm losing track of time. And I guess what's really interesting about this experience is we've been going through it at the same time as all of our clients have been going through it, right? So we can kind of really identify, truly empathize and understand what's going on. So in terms of how it's, I guess, affected me, it's really interesting because there is no, I guess, exact way to describe that. It has been a big roller coaster of emotions, I would say. I think from the moment, you know, we all kind of got locked down back in March 2020, that was a real kind of, wow, what's going on here moment. And so that was really interesting because as a psychologist, when something like that happens, you're used to really reading the room and looking at people and looking for, okay, what's going on here? How are people experiencing things? How are they reacting? And so it was this is going to sound really odd, but for me, it's been really curious and fascinating to watch everything I've kind of learned and studied and explored play out in people's reactions so explicitly. And also just in myself, like I've had ups and downs, and what does this mean? Like one day I want to tear my hair out. One day I'm feeling really like driven and pumped and I need to get results. I need to get things done. And it's like trying to kind of understand, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling or thinking the way that I'm thinking? And it's just such a natural reaction to change or transition. And obviously with that change and transition, there's going to be natural dips in motivation and energy. So I guess I've been kind of thinking, you know, on a personal level, but also with people that I've connected with and that I've been, you know, who I've been working with, you know, from ongoing clients that I've been working with for a long time to kind of new clients, is, well, how do I stay grounded when everything around me is, you know, constantly changing? But how do I also stay focused? So how do I stay grounded? How do I stay focused? And how do I keep my energy up and stay motivated? So I'm constantly, I guess, checking in on those things, right? Am I grounded right now? Am I focused? You know, am I motivated? Am I driven? And I'm just constantly, I guess, judging what I need at any given moment. And what does my client in front of me need? You know, what is their energy like today? How are they feeling? How can I kind of sense check how they're feeling? And how am I then going to tailor my response to that individual or that team based on their energy levels? So
really interesting. But I guess the first question I'd have is, you know, just thinking about some of my clients, you know, how do you bring that kind of self-awareness in with your clients to actually make that decision or have that self-awareness to think about those questions? You know, how am I feeling, or how am I going to stay focused? Do you have certain tactics that you do with clients?
Yeah, and really good question, Ben. So I guess, you know, I'm really lucky that is something that I insist on working on from the beginning, the self-awareness piece. And it's something that I guess comes at the start of everything I do, is kind of assessing, okay, how, and look, this is a massive journey that I'm going on. I can't say that I'm massively self-aware. Like I'm constantly learning and evolving.
I think we all are, right?
But when I'm working with clients, I kind of totally, and it's a life's journey. And I think when I'm working with a client, that's what I probably start with, trying to get a sense of at the beginning, you know, how self-aware is this person in front of me, or this team in front of me, or this organization. So I will have different ways to, I guess, assess that and benchmark it. And okay, if this is where that person's at, what do they then need? And I talk to people about self-awareness, educate them. The starting point I always have is very psychological, and it's always giving a bit of psycho education around the brain, because obviously we go to school, we get taught about maths, English, science, whatever. No one really stops to say, hang on a second, you've got all of these like muscles, organs in your body. So I quite often start with a bit of psychoeducation. As I'm sure, whenever I've worked with a great coach who's kind of training me, personal trainer, they will teach me a little bit about what I don't know about my body, about my fitness, etc. So I always, I guess, start with, we've got these two different parts of our brain. We've got that kind of cognitive, evolved, beautiful, sophisticated, knows how to behave part of our brain. And then we've got like the reptilian, oldest part of our brain, that is just, can be all over the place, and is just, you just don't know what it's going to get up to from one day to the next. And you've got the two of them trying to work together to support one another. So I always, I guess, start with talking to people about the fact that we have these two different parts of our brain. And I spend a lot of time focusing on, I guess, the emotional part of our brain, and looking at the systems within that emotional part of our brain that have to be supported and have to be nurtured and have to be looked after. And so I'm always raising people's self-awareness, and that basically that emotional part of our brain has three massive drivers. And I kind of talk to people a lot about like driving a car, having three different gears, because you've got the part of your emotional brain that's doing everything it can to protect you from danger, to keep you alive. You've got the part of your emotional brain that's doing everything it can to make you survive and have a really good life and feel motivated. And you've got the other part of your emotional brain that is trying desperately to feel looked after, recovered, get energy, and feel connected to people around us. And those three, I guess, functional parts of our emotional brain need us to be aware of them, to look after them, to nurture them, so that they stay in balance. Because it's only when those parts, it's so interesting, because it's only when those parts are kind of looked after that your more sophisticated parts of your brain, the neocortex, can really like engage and do the stuff that we need to do as 21st century human beings. So I always kind of start, that's my kind of starting point when it comes to self-awareness, and then out from there.
Do you find that, I find personally, obviously I wouldn't go into those depths because that's out of my my realm, but certainly, when speaking to clients that are just starting off, and you start to talk about, the importance of recovery, the importance of self-awareness, it's almost as if we've been taught since an early age that we don't have these biological things that happen. We don't have these, reactive things that our body, will adapt to. I was working with a client not too long ago about, just let's look at your dysfunctional breathing. You don't breathe properly, and that has a huge effect on your nervous system. And, his response was, well, I breathe every day. And it's so interesting because it's true, you do breathe every day, but that doesn't mean that you're breathing optimally, and it doesn't mean you're adding stress. So it's so interesting that you then can go that extra layer to kind of how you can get that information. And would you do that, thinking about the guys listening, would you do that from a point of a consultation? Is it a form? Any nuggets that some of the guys could start trying to dive a bit deeper? Not too deep, but like we mentioned, but, would they, is there questionnaires and things like that?
Really good question. And I think there is different ways you can do that. And I think what you're saying there, I guess a couple of things I want to pick up on is, one is, what do I feel comfortable doing as a professional, depending on my area of expertise? So where's my boundary? And also then, okay, if this is my boundary, how can I still go deeper within my boundary? And I would encourage everybody, I guess, can read about this, learn about this, understand a bit more about the brain. And there's different books, everything from that famous Chimp Paradox book that I'm sure you've heard of. There's like a whole range of different books which maybe we can link into this podcast. And there's nothing wrong with, I guess, like for me, it's not necessarily about a form or like sitting down and going through a form, although I do tend to kind of draw it out. I like to draw things visually. I like to draw these 3 different systems just to kind of show people, okay, these are the different parts, and they're kind of like a pie chart. They need balance, and if one of them gets out of balance, then it's going to get into we're going to get into trouble, we're going to get stuck, and we're not going to feel great. But I guess for me, it's the art of storytelling. And I know that, talking to you, Ben, and lots of coaches and anyone listening to this podcast, you will have your own kind of story to tell clients and narrative to explain things. And essentially, most 99.9% of people don't necessarily want the deep science, but they want to just have an initial awareness. And they just need you to do exactly what you were just saying about the breathing and the dysfunction of the breathing, to say, look, I have this bit of knowledge that I'm going to share with you that's going to help you. But what you need to realize as a client is we're not educated to understand this stuff. And you've kind of got to trust me, and you've got to roll with it, because, I'm the one that's got this bit of knowledge right here that I'm going to use to support you. And I think there was someone on your podcast, and forgive me, my was it Ryan? That was on your last, I can't remember.
Richie.
Anyway, an amazing, Richie, sorry, thank you. Yeah, Richie was talking about gas, his poor breathing as like as a rugby player, and gassing, and, it is so interesting, because every client we work with has their own realm of knowledge and expertise, and everyone brings experience and expertise into the room of any conversation. And all we're trying to do as professionals, I guess, is just say, look, there's this little nugget that I've got to share with you that you're not going to be aware of necessarily, because you haven't come across this. And depending on how much knowledge that person has, we can kind of add to it or build on their frame of reference with it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And there's so much positiveness that some of the, the trainers can start adding to their clients. So I wanted to touch base also. Obviously, this last, how long has it been now? 12 months. Let's say 12 months. There's been a huge boom in digital fitness, which kind of led me to kind of start this podcast. But one thing has kind of stood out from having the digital fitness element that's missing, let's say, is the connection piece, and that social connection and the importance of community. So could you just maybe explain, what is social connection and why it's so important for us as human beings?
Yeah, and I love that you're asking this then, because I think it's hugely underestimated by a huge part of the population. And it goes back to what we've been talking about, is this maybe lack of awareness around what our body needs and what we need as human beings. So why is social connection important? I guess it's as important as oxygen to our lungs, and it's as important as food is to our survival. Going back to, I guess, thinking about those parts of our emotional brain. So we've got these 3 systems. I'm going to just refer to them, I guess, as the threat system, the drive system, the recovery system. Yeah. And the threat system, doing everything it can to keep us alive, responds to all sorts of stress. The drive system, doing everything it can for us to feel motivated, to get up, to do stuff. The recovery system, which is where the social connection piece comes in, has 2 functions. So we've got this really important part of our brain that has 2 really key requirements. One is to have its energy top back up, and the other is to feel socially connected with other human beings, because we are ultimately social primates. Like, we have evolved because of social connection, and without that social connection, sad times, really sad times on so many different levels. I don't think we just can't survive. And basically, I think, again, why I've been really fascinated about the lockdown is the impact not seeing people we love, care about, has had on us. But it's not just about the people we love and care about. It's about the bus driver, the guy sweeping the roads. It's about the person in, you know, the local shop where you pop in and have a chat. We need not just connection with our family and friends, we need ongoing interspersed connection throughout our day in order to have the right amount of energy in order to optimally function. So we need this social connection in order to be at our best. And I don't know about you, but I don't think any of us have been at our full best, you know, through the lockdown period. We know that we're just surviving, really. We're just trying to get by. And it's so important, and it's really interesting thinking about it from kind of digital fitness. And I've been actually experimenting with this because, you know, I've worked with personal trainers, I've tried all the apps, etc. And the apps, they are great. Like having something where you're not I guess committed to a time, you don't have accountability, things like that. They're easy, they're cheap, but they just don't have the same impact as having social connection with another human being can have. So it's just so crucial. And, you know, I was thinking about, I know you and I kind of often talk about this, but if we think about the massive mental, I guess, health crisis we've got, you know, nationally and internationally, one of the key things that's been identified that's having a massive effect on people is the lack of social connection. Anyone who's interested in this, there's a really great book called Lost Connection, which explores this. Brilliant. Which is all about how we desperately need connection.
Lost connection. I'll add that into the session notes, guys that are listening. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about the fitness apps. Now, of course, I'm always investigating this with the remote coach platform being a digital app, but the way that and I also love just asking questions of people using them and hearing what their experience is. And I think, like you said, there's this huge gap. And that's why also we started this podcast, because so many trainers were so fearful, thinking, oh my God, you know, am I going to have a job? Am I going to be replaced? Because we hear about the different digital offerings. And I think the good thing that's come out of this, I actually think that we can grow as a fitness industry, is that there's a huge gap between the pelotons, you know, the media that's exceptional. You know, you're on your bike and you've had this great experience within the session, but then you get off the session, you got no one to speak to. You're not no one to tell that you had a great workout, right? And this is exactly what someone had mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago. But the same on the other end of the spectrum, and that's quite a premium. You know, to get a Peloton bike cost you, you know, a fair bit of money. Then you have the free apps. You know, so again, the content is great. So you've got that motivational piece when you actually open the app. But there's nothing like someone opening or having a call or a session and saying hello, you know, and that's what I think us as fitness professionals really need to focus on, is that, you know, there's always going to be a place for people that need people. And it's 100%. So good that you say that, because I think it will give people listening to this thinking, you know, there's a place for me in this.
Hugely. World. Completely and utterly. And, you know, I was thinking about this too, as, you know, psychologists, people, you know, will psychologists be replaced with robots one day? So it's, you know, it's a fear that kind of crosses everywhere. And I mean, AI is incredible and it's getting better all the time. And I love technology. I love the advances of technology. And I think there's a massive place for those advances in AI. But you can't replace the true experience of being with another human being. And that is because of this emotional function of our brain. We need this human social connection. And it's funny because if we were robots, or if we purely had rational functioning and we purely acted out of the cognitive layer of our brain, our neocortex, we would easily be fooled by another robot talking to us. But we can't be, because we have this emotional brain, which just knows that it's not the same thing and knows it needs more than, you know, a kind of artificial response.
Yeah, well, I saw an interesting study not too long ago, and it was just highlighting, they were calling it social contract, and the point being that the NHS they were having a huge problem with people not turning up to appointments. So
Yes.
NHS, for the international
Yeah.
listeners, is our medical um, industry or service here in the
Yeah.
UK. But and then they had these posters within the GP surgery which said, don't be late. But obviously the only people that were seeing that were the people that were going to the
Exactly.
appointments. So they literally just turned a slight piece of communication around, where they asked the receptionists that were booking the appointments to ask the individuals whether they would let them know, if they were going to not turn up to the appointment. And even just having that communication, that
Mm,
I'm not going to let another human being down, rather than booking it
definitely.
online, was a
Definitely.
huge impact, huge
Mm,
impact. So it just shows that we innately have this connection with other human beings, even the ones that we maybe don't know.
yeah.
And so with that, for a fitness professional, and looking at kind of what people are doing at the moment, is, does it need to be a face-to-face meeting? Can they do it through audio? Is it messaging? What are the kind of tactics that trainers can use to create that social connection, or improve
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Really, so many different things. And I'm sure people listening, have so many different strategies and techniques that they're using. I think it's about, you've drawn attention there to then the accountability piece. So how do I kind of add language in that shows I'm accountable to another human being? So I think there's a whole host of different things we can do. And there's a really interesting behavioural psychology unit in the UK. I don't know if you've heard of them, called the Nudge Unit, which do all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
things in order to, I guess, nudge behaviour. So I guess what we need to do is think, how can we add in social nudges? So how can I make sure my client knows that I care about them, that I hold them in mind? Because I think, Ben, you'll be thinking about a client. I'm constantly thinking about a client. And I think it's about being explicit about the fact that I'm intentionally thinking about them, thinking about their progress, wondering how they're getting on, and not just kind of holding that in and being
Yeah.
implicit about it, but actually articulating that. So we have a thing, in psychology about kind of holding people in mind and letting them know that. So I will, maybe drop a text to a client or an email if I've seen something that I think will interest them. Here's a kind of piece that came up in our discussion today. Why don't you look at this? Tell me what you think. Or I might just WhatsApp them something I've seen. And I think it's all that kind of holding in mind helps us feel connected and safe as human beings. So I think there's lots of things we can do. And I was kind of like thinking about stuff to share with you today. And I think, how can we also like boost the positive emotions of the people we're around? And we can do that on two levels, I think, as coaches working with clients. We can do that on a high positive emotion. So how can we express like gratitude for what someone is doing? I really appreciate how you pushed yourself today. I really appreciate that you just chucked yourself in, you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone. How can I also just say, I noticed that strength in you when you were doing that today, that I was really impressed by, so that people can see. It's almost like we need to more intentionally hold up the mirror of the strengths that we're seeing back at the person that we're working with.
Yeah.
And I think that helps people feel connected and engaged in the moment, but also just, between sessions or between conversations, letting someone know we're continuing to hold them in mind through text messages, through emails, however it is that we have communication set up with our
Yeah.
client. Um,
So
and I,
important.
yeah, it is. It's really important. And I think it's also about, for me, and where I think we have a massive USP as coaches, as human beings, real life human beings, is, also going back to the words you use, social contracts, discussing with my client or who I'm working with, like, how shall we keep our communication going? How shall we keep our connection going? What is it that you value? And also using that to tailor the type of support that we offer. Because some people don't want a WhatsApp message. They've had enough of WhatsApp messages. Some
Yeah.
people
No.
want an email. Some people want a picture, want a photo. Like one of my clients, I was working with him, And he was trying to work towards getting more of a kind of work-life balance, and we were talking about all the different ways he could do that, and he was going to clear out his garage and build his own gym, and and just one day I woke up and in my email inbox there was a picture of his punch bag that he'd set up in his garage, and I was just like, you made my day, like, by just seeing that. It makes me so happy. But I could have just not shared that information. I could have just been like, oh, okay, cool, but it's about actually, no, we need to more intentionally express how we're feeling, thinking, and sharing that back with our client. Yes. And keeping it going.
And it's not a very British thing, is it?
No, do you know what? It's not a British thing. It's also not a cultural thing in so many different countries. Because I think we often say it was a British, like, stiff upper lip thing. But actually, one thing that I find hugely fascinating in psychology is something called the negativity bias.
Okay.
So we have a bias to be negative.
Yeah.
So we have within our kind of, going back to the emotional brain, our threat system is doing everything it can to look out for any sense of danger or threat to us.
Yeah.
So we automatically lean towards thinking negatively about stuff. And there's a famous study by a researcher, Baumeister, called Bad is Stronger Than Good. So bad experiences have a massive more feeling impact on us than good positive experiences. And I'll tell you why this is important in a moment, but those bad experiences really stand out. So we consciously, as coaches who are trying to promote optimal functioning, need to tip the bias. So we need to have a positivity bias in order to help our clients that we work with. Yeah. Now, it might feel not initially natural, but I guarantee you, once you start doing more of this, once you start pushing the kind of positive, encouraging, championing support, and you'll know this yourself, Ben, people adapt to it, they enjoy it, they grow from it.
Yeah.
And the negativity bias, is kind of works against us in many ways when it comes to social connection, because for us to grow and for us to learn and for us to push ourselves out of our comfort zone, we need to have more positive communication and more positive interaction than negative interaction. And there's some really famous studies into relationships between human beings which look at what the ratio should be. So for every negative interaction we have, we need to have at least 5 positive interactions in order to recover and get back to, I guess, 0. Wow. In order to move forward. So, going back to, if I'm kind of giving someone kind of feedback or constructive criticism about something, something to do with their self-awareness, a blind spot they've not noticed, I will give some feedback on that thing that's not going well. And I'll be really crystal clear about that. But I'll also back it up with 5 other things that are going really well, because I need to motivate the person that I'm working with in both directions. Yeah. I need to counteract it with positive information, or it's not going to land and it's not going to fully motivate. It might land momentarily, but trust me, the relationship will wear out further down the line.
Yeah, that's powerful, because my question was going to be, does frequency of the connections matter? So that obviously dives into a bit of that. But I think, some trainers or fit pros, they also think, oh, I've got to do, all of this for my 20, 30 clients. Yeah. And, I think the first thing is you probably already do anyway, to a certain degree. And, I was chatting to a coach the other day, a really good coach as well, that, a lot of his communication is just emojis, and it makes his client's day, so it doesn't need to be hugely thought out. It's just showing that you care, and and when you are thinking of them, like you said, I guess that's the takeaway, make sure that they know you're thinking about them, or how they're getting on. That's really interesting.
And I guess going to that point, because I think it is a really good point, because people's energy levels and emotional levels, do I have to do all this additional work? I'd kind of change your mindset on that a little bit. And it's something that, I've worked on as well, is actually me giving others positive encouragement, reinforcement, me kind of adding more positive communication into my life actually brings me energy.
Yeah.
and it brings me motivation, and I get feedback on the feedback that I'm giving. So if I send
Yeah.
that emoji, I get an emoji back, or if I send that picture, I get something back,
Yes, of course.
and it becomes a kind of virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
So it works both ways, and it's amazing the energy that we get back from our clients as well when we really kind of get on board and feel authentic with it.
Yeah, it's nothing better than your clients achieving goals, right? Because you just get
Definitely.
that energy boost. So what about the trainers that are working with, say, groups? You know, is there anything that you could touch on when you've got a group client base?
Yeah, really interesting. So I work a lot with teams, Ben, and I love it, and it's kind of a growing part of my practice. And I've just got to say, like, the work I do with teams, I'm learning so much from sports psychology. So I imagine, like, all of your coaches are doing a lot of amazing work with this anyway. And like you said, I think sometimes we're not conscious of the good stuff that we're doing. But in terms of working with teams, I guess we're always striving to make the team greater than the sum of its parts. So we're always trying to, I guess, exceed performance by making, if it's 6 leaders that we're working with in a team, I'm trying to make those 6 leaders the equivalent to, 7 leaders when they're working together. But what can quite often happen in a team is you can have 6 leaders becoming the equivalent of 3 leaders working together, because there's a lack of unity and there's a lack of cohesion. So what I'm constantly trying to do, and we can think about this, in terms of football, is like, help that group of players play well together as a team. So it's all about strengths. But it goes back to, how we started this conversation, the self-awareness piece, because it moves, when you're working in a team, you're moving from self-awareness to other awareness. So I not only need to know myself really well, I need to know others really well. And that obviously starts with the self-awareness, and then you build on the other awareness. So in that sense, I'm thinking, okay, well, how do I know others well? The way I emotionally regulate as a human being, so the way I recover or the way I motivate myself will be different to the way you recover or motivate yourself, Ben. So every kind of coach listening to this will have different ways they recover and motivate themselves. There will be lots of commonality, and there will be lots of shared ways of doing that. But in a team or in a group, we need to kind of get to know one another, to support one another, to bring the best out of ourselves. So how do we play to our strengths? So, drawing on those strengths, calling those strengths out, and just helping people to elevate the performance of each other is going to be critical in doing that.
Yeah, gosh. And other awareness, other people's awareness, so powerful. And it can make such a difference. With the studios, I think we tried to do things first and foremost, where we were just giving our clients what we thought was value. But as soon as we started to add in, additional time in sessions where they could actually communicate with each other, and you suddenly hear clients calling out to other clients, through a virtual session, was really fascinating, because like you said, it's those other little touching points that create that connection. Amazing. So with then fitness professionals that are listening, what would you say is the first or the top 2 to 3 things they could do to get started with trying to build more connection with their clients or their clients to clients?
Top 2 things. So I guess my number 1 would be increasing levels of communication in a way that work both for the coach and the client, and increasing the positivity of the communication. So being intentional about shifting that negativity bias, because it's going to help you as a coach, it's going to help the client that you're working with. So how can I elevate my positive communication through things like gratitude, savoring the session that we had, like calling out how good it was for us, spotting strengths in what I've seen or noticed in a session or moving forward, just continuing that positive communication. And I guess the other thing is, we're always looking in sport coaching and the work that I do to creating sustainable behaviour change. So how can I also make those ongoing positive communication between sessions or between conversations, help nudge towards the behavior change that the person wants to see. And I guess, we want to reinforce the successes. So what's been going well, isn't that great? Kind of keep that up. And then also kind of push and stretch out the comfort zone to try something, to push oneself forward even more in building behavior change.
Maybe challenges and things like that.
I think it's about, it could be small challenges. It could be building on what you've already done and strengthening that. And I think it's, going back to what I was saying earlier on, I think you need to also contract for that a little bit with your client and agree like what's going to be really helpful. So I remember once working with an amazing trainer and being asked to kind of send pictures of my food. And, it was so great because she was brilliant at working with me. We had a fantastic relationship, but it was a step too far for me. So I had to kind of like say, look, I'm not sending pictures of my food because I don't want to guilt trip every time I eat that, that thing that I shouldn't be eating. So she was like, yeah, cool, totally. She was like, oh, just send me a list of like what you're doing. So I think that there's that negotiation piece but with each other, like what is it that we want to kind of share between sessions and conversations. But I think it's all about that positive support. And sometimes that positive support is also about just saying, give yourself a break. Like if you're feeling that you just can't do that today, sometimes the best thing you need to do is rest and accept that and just be comfortable with that. So,
Yeah, no, that's so important. I think just to add on that, when I was starting out as a trainer, a really experienced trainer at the time said to me that, sometimes there's more important things than your training regime and everything. And sometimes those things are just being a human, whatever it is. So that's really interesting. But Cornelia, thank you so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed this. There's so many gems in there and nuggets of information that people can take away. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I look forward to continuing these conversations.